Welcome to the Enchanted Archives, where folklore meets forgotten history and the past refuses to stay buried. This is a space where ancient legends, eerie truths, and unexplained mysteries are brought back into the light, one tale at a time. Every house has a story. Some are love letters to the past, others are warnings. They echo, they whisper, they scream. And some houses don't want to be lived in at all. Today we begin with one of Egypt's most unsettling mysteries. A place shunned by time and touched by fear. A place known simply as the Roushdy House. But this isn't just about one building, it's about a pattern. A thread of ghostly echoes and cursed architecture that spans continents. And to understand how these threads are woven into the very foundations of homes, we begin on a quiet street corner in Alexandria. I'm Ahmed Mansour, and this is the Enchanted Archives. Built in the early 1960s in the upscale Roushdy district of Alexandria, the house was meant to be a symbol of wealth and achievement. Its design spared no expense. 4 floors adorned with Italian marble, imported fixtures, and intricately carved balconies. But the grandeur didn't last. Almost as soon as construction wrapped up in 1963, unsettling rumors began to take root. The first tenants moved in the following year. Just 3 weeks later, they vanished without a trace. No warning, no explanation. Neighbors whispered about nightly arguments, a family gripped by fear, and a young girl who refused to sleep in her own room. The next family lasted even less time. A police report filed in early 1965 described a break-in with a curious twist. Nothing had been taken. The mother of the household claimed she saw a woman in a shredded white dress, standing silently at the end of the hallway. When authorities searched the apartment, they discovered deep claw marks on the inside of a locked door. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, the building changed hands more times than anyone could count. No one stayed long. In 1981, an elderly couple tried to breathe new life into it with renovations, but the project was doomed from the start. 3 separate contractors suffered strange accidents on site. One plummeted from the 3rd floor, shattering both legs. Another claimed his tools vanished without a trace. The third, a young electrician, refused to return after hearing what he described as chanting coming from an empty room. A priest was eventually called in. He walked the halls, recited scripture, and blessed the crumbling walls. When asked about his fee, he simply shook his head and said, "Some things cannot be cleansed." By the 1990s, the building was sealed off entirely. In 1994, the local authorities attempted to demolish it. The bulldozer's engine exploded before it even touched the walls. The crew refused to come back. A municipal official who visited the site collapsed on the spot and was later hospitalized with seizures no doctor could explain. Then came the recordings. In 1997, a local journalist tried to document the strange history of the place. His audio tapes, now the stuff of internet legend, captured eerie low whispers and a child's voice repeating the same chilling phrase over and over. "Don't open the door." Locals still avoid the property. Children dare each other to touch the gate. Taxi drivers cross to the other side of the road when passing. And if you ask about it, as I have, you'll hear the same answer again and again. It's better left alone. But this isn't just Egypt's story, nor is it just a Western phenomenon. The Middle East holds its own dark archives of haunted dwellings, homes steeped in centuries of blood, betrayal, and folklore that warn us not to linger too long. Take, for example, the infamous Al-Qasimi House in the Emirate. Built in the 1980s by a prominent family, it was meant to be a palace of opulence. But within weeks of its completion, the family fled. They claimed to see shadowy figures gliding across the marble floors, to hear the whispers of children where no child lived, and to feel something ancient stirring beneath the ground. Rumors spread that the home was built atop a jinn burial site. Even the government sealed the property. To this day, it remains abandoned, guarded only by rust and sand. Then there's the Dar al-Basha in the old Medina of Fez, Morocco, a centuries-old riad once home to a powerful Ottoman governor. After his assassination in 1711, the house became a tomb for secrets. Locals claim his spirit still roams the halls, dragging his executioner's blade across the tiles. Guests who've stayed the night speak of phantom hands tugging at their bedsheets, of Arabic prayers recited backwards, of mirrors that fog without heat. And in Lebanon, the once grand Hotel Grand Safar, perched in the mountains overlooking the Bekaa Valley, tells a similar tale. Opened in 1892, it welcomed kings, presidents, and poets. But after the Lebanese Civil War erupted in 1975, the hotel closed. Since then, stories of ghostly apparitions dancing in its ruined ballroom have emerged. In 2003, a group of urban explorers captured footage of a woman in white standing at a third-floor window, despite the building being entirely empty. These Middle Eastern homes echo the same truth, that trauma knows no borders. Now, if we travel west across oceans and eras, we find other homes just as unwilling to rest. In 1884, Sarah Winchester, heir to the Winchester repeating arms fortune, purchased a modest 8-room farmhouse in San Jose, California. Sarah was grieving. Her infant daughter, Annie, had died of marasmus in 1866. Her husband, William, succumbed to tuberculosis in 1881. A spiritualist in Boston told her she was haunted, cursed by the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles. Build, the medium warned, and you will live. Stop, and you will die. And so she built. For 38 years, until her death in 1922. The Winchester Mystery House grew to over 24,000 square feet. It boasts 160 rooms, 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 47 stairways, and 6 kitchens. Staircases climb to ceilings. Doors open into walls. The architecture defies logic, but perhaps that was the point. Sarah claimed the ghosts were watching. She wore a black veil, spoke to spirits in a seance room, and changed bedrooms each night to confuse the dead. Visitors to the house, now a museum, report cold spots, disembodied voices, and feelings of intense grief. In 1975, a caretaker reported being locked in the Daisy Room by an unseen force. He quit the next day. Others have captured strange orbs and shadowy figures in photographs. Some believe Sarah wasn't mad, but terrified, and the house was her defense. Across the Atlantic, in the quiet English village of Borley in Essex, stood another haunted home. Borley Rectory, built in 1862 by Reverend Henry Bull, quickly earned a reputation. The ghost of a nun was frequently spotted wandering the grounds. According to local legend, she had tried to elope with a monk centuries earlier. They were caught. He was executed. She was bricked up within the convent walls. In 1929, the Daily Mirror sent journalist V.C. Wall and psychic investigator Harry Price to the rectory. Over the following year, Price documented over 2,000 unexplained phenomena. Messages scrawled on walls, objects levitating, bells ringing with no apparent source. One message read, "Marianne, please help me." Marianne Foister, then living in the rectory, claimed she had been thrown from her bed by invisible hands. Her husband, Reverend Lionel Foister, tried to bless the home. He failed. In February 1939, Borley Rectory caught fire. Witnesses claimed to see figures moving in the flames. The structure was finally demolished in 1944, but the land remains active. Paranormal investigators continue to report activity, especially on the original Nun's Path. Now we turn our eyes to the southern hemisphere. In June, New South Wales sits Monte Cristo Homestead. Built in 1885 by Christopher Crawley, the mansion stands as a Victorian gem, but beneath its ornate iron lacework and manicured gardens lies darkness. After Christopher's death in 1910, his wife Elizabeth became a recluse. She rarely left her room for 23 years, dying in 1933. The homestead was left to decay. Its history includes a series of tragic incidents: a stable boy who died in a fire, a maid who fell, some say was pushed, from the balcony, and a man with developmental disabilities chained in an outbuilding for decades. The house passed into the hands of the Ryan family in 1963, who began restorations. But they too reported strange occurrences. Visitors have claimed to hear a woman weeping in the hallway, cold spots in Elizabeth's room, a young boy crying in the nursery. In 1993, a guest collapsed while climbing the staircase. She said she felt an invisible hand around her throat. Paranormal researchers believe the house holds residual energy, emotions embedded into the architecture itself. Our next story takes us to France, where a noblewoman's tragic end has echoed through castle halls for centuries. Her spirit, forever clad in green, wanders through one of Europe's most opulent yet haunted estates. Before we continue to our final story, let's take a quick sponsored break. Let's leave Australia and step into the French countryside. The Château de Brissac, towering above the Loire Valley, was originally built in the 11th century and rebuilt in the 15th. Within its Renaissance halls roams La Dame Verte, the Green Lady. She is believed to be Charlotte de Brézé, murdered by her husband Jacques de Brissac in the 1470s after discovering her infidelity. According to historical records, both Charlotte and her lover were found in the tower, slain with a sword. Since then, guests have reported seeing a woman in a green gown with a distorted, hollow face. The current Duke of Brissac, descendant of the same family, has acknowledged the hauntings, though he speaks of them rarely. In 1983, a documentary crew recorded unexplained audio in the tower room. The footage was never released. And now, we return east, to Japan. The Himuro Mansion, if it exists, lies in the mountains just outside Tokyo. According to legend, it was the site of a gruesome ritual known as the strangling ritual. Every half-century, a girl was raised in isolation, cut off from all contact. On the appointed day, her limbs and neck were tied with sacred ropes, then pulled in opposite directions to prevent evil from escaping into the world. The last ritual failed. The maiden, it is said, fell in love with a caretaker. Her spiritual purity was broken. The family panicked. In a frenzy, they slaughtered one another. Urban explorers who claim to have found the site report bloodstains, shattered ritual mirrors, and whispers in the wind. No official confirmation of the mansion's location exists, but the legend lives on. It inspired the 2001 video game Fatal Frame, where the player uses a mystical camera to capture spirits. These homes span cultures and centuries, but the symptoms are eerily familiar. Whispers in the dark, figures in the hallway, the overwhelming feeling that you are not alone. So why do we fear haunted houses? Perhaps because a house is meant to protect us, shelter us. When it becomes a threat, it flips the foundation of safety. And when pain occurs within its walls, death, betrayal, grief, can we be sure that it doesn't stay behind? Psychologists speak of pareidolia, seeing patterns where none exist, of shared trauma, communal legends, and the power of suggestion. But sometimes, too many coincidences add up, and sometimes, the silence between screams is the loudest sound of all. If you enjoyed this episode of the Enchanted Archives, follow us on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, X, and Facebook. And don't forget, the full episode is also available on YouTube with Arabic subtitles. Share it with someone who loves ancient mystery, or someone who thinks curses are just bedtime stories. When you find us, leave a comment or a sign you were here. I like it when people leave breadcrumbs. This episode of the Enchanted Archives was written, produced, and narrated by me, Ahmed Mansour, with research by Samar al-Murali. If you'd prefer to explore the archives without interruptions, you can subscribe to the Enchanted Archives on Apple Podcasts for an ad-free experience. It keeps the stories flowing and the silence intact. For now, see you next time and stay spooky.